Welcome everyone to this presentation. This is the same presentation that I gave at this year's annual Creation Research Society conference in Missouri, in St. Louis, the Missouri Baptist University. I had the privilege to go there and to present my research, and everything went very well. But unfortunately, they did not record the presentations, and so I got permission from them to make my own recording so that I can distribute this work as I see fit. Yeah, so let's start. This was me presenting at the conference in St. Louis. So the title of the original talk was that proboscidea does not equal the elephant holobaramin. And what this basically means is that the elephant holobaramin refers to the original elephant kind that the Lord created. And that and it includes all the animals that were part of the elephant kind. And I'm saying that this is not the same group of animals as what the secular science in the secular taxonomic system called the proboscidea, which is the order of animals where they group this individual to the right, which is your part of your paleo-proboscideans, your Erytherium. They say that this is the ancestors to what we see in our modern elephants, and that they're all from the same in the same order and related. And this is what we're going to look at a bit more closer now. So the objectives of the study is to show that there is not a significant evidence in secular peer-reviewed scientific publications to support the hypothesis of paleo-proboscideans being the ancestors of modern elephants. It's also to make a case for irreducible complexity in the elephant and to provide a foundation for future studies aimed at defining the elephant holobaramin. So my presentation went so well, and I met such nice scientists in creationism at the conference that there was a couple of people that offered to help me that have been working in the field of baraminology to take this research further and to define the elephant holobaramin from the fossil records and the information that we have available to us at the moment. And so, which I'm very grateful for. So there will definitely be some more work done in this area. But to understand my initial approach to this research, it's the first time that I'm actually giving a talk about research in creationism. I used to be an evolutionist, and I was agnostic at that stage. So I believed in Jesus, and I believed that he was just a prophet like Muhammad, and that many roads led to finding God, that there was a God, a superpower, but I didn't know. I didn't think that you could define him or say that there's only one way. So that was and I didn't have a personal relationship with the Lord. And so I did my PhD with a Dutch university in the Netherlands, and the fieldwork was based in the Kruger National Park area. And it focused on various types of large herbivores in the African savanna, but more specifically on elephants and their foraging behavior. And I even published an article from that in Acta Zoologica, showing why elephants have evolved trunks. And that's what I fully believed at that stage and supported. And yeah, that is what my research was based on. And in this talk, you'll see that's very ironic that things are now quite different. I also did a lot of research on elephant behavior, the impact of tourism on elephants. And yeah, I spent more than 25 years on different projects, researching elephants on and off, and being involved in organizations like the Elephant Specialist Advisory Group, where we helped owners and managers how to better manage their elephants in fenced reserves. So it was quite a mind switch when I got saved, because when I got saved, I got radically saved, met Jesus Christ and gave my life to him, and my life has never been the same. But shortly after I got saved, the Holy Spirit convicted me of the truth of his word. and the truth of Genesis, because I had this battle and conflict in me because I felt like, I'm teaching evolution, but the Bible says this. So I started digging into, starting from the word and taking that as the basis of truth and looking at creation science and then discovering all the work that has already been done out there with some amazing things that have already been shown. But I think the work that impacted me the most was the work by Dr. Kurt Wise. I found a biology textbook by him called Devotional Biology. And when I read that textbook, it's something in me changed. It was like I struggled for years to shift my mind after I got saved to my way of thinking from thinking about evolution, because that was what I is all I've learned throughout my entire academic career, to switch that into thinking like from a perspective of God, the creator, and creation, like, and what he's trying to try us from creation. And in this book, Dr. Kurt Wise really explained that we should look at creation as God as the artist, where we see we see facets of his character displayed in creation, and we need to always give him the glory when we look at something and think of him as the designer, as the architect, who created everything, and what of him is in the thing that we are looking at. And then I started looking at elephants quite differently. And I thought, like, when I look at the elephant, what is unique about this animal? And what is the design elements that the Lord put into the elephant that's different from other animals? So, and I came up with these ones. The ones, the dotted orange ones, are ones that are shared with other mammals, but they are very rare. Like the intra-abdominal testes, you also find in bats, but most other animals have scrotum with the testes. The breasts that are between the front legs, like most quadrupeds, have them behind in between the back legs. But similar to primates, the elephants have them in front. And then the elongated incisors, not the canines, the incisors, is why with the evolutionary model they put they one of the reasons they group the elephants and the rock hyrax and the sea cow together. So they do share some of these features, but there are others that are really unique to elephant. First of all, they've got the largest cerebellum. It's a part of the brain of any mammal. They've got these temporal glands between the eye and the ear that is really unique, and that is very much related to reproductive status, and also to emotions. It's a fascinating future of elephants. I've studied a little, I've done some research on it, but I think there's so much more locked up in this that I'd like to look at in future. Then there's the 6 sets of teeth that wears off throughout the animal's lifetime. They live to about 60 years of age. And then they've got this incredibly long trunk. And we're going to zoom into the trunk a little bit now and look a bit more at the trunk and how unique and incredible it really is. And then the feet of cushioned feet that the feet of cushioned feet that that is also very, very specialized, and we will zoom into that as well just now. So when we look at all of these futures together, these design elements, because the elephant have that, they have abilities and higher level functions, things that they can do that are also unique, For example, they've got the largest body size of all terrestrial mammals, currently extant terrestrial mammals. They are highly the hypersensitive and emotional, and this is where the temporal gland also come in. They've got an extensive communication system, so they can communicate tactically, chemically, vocally. They've got a whole language. There's endless research in this field as well. Then they've got a multi-tiered complex social structure, and it consists of four tiers that's been described just for the female specifically. You get the mother or the matriarch and her calf as the core unit, and then their sisters, aunties, daughters, and related offspring form what we call family groups. And there's roughly about 10 animals in a family group. As these family group sizes increase, they start splitting up and they form what we call bond groups. But these bond groups stay associated, they meet regularly. And then within a region, when resources allow it, sometimes these bond groups, many of those bond groups come together and what they form, what they call clans. And these meetings are very important because they figure out who is who and what is the hierarchy. So there's also a hierarchy between the different family groups and the different matriarchs. And so, yeah, it's much more complex than we sometimes think. They also select resources at larger scale. So I was very fortunate in my PhD study. We were part of a large scale fertilization experiment in the Greater Kruger in the Mupani veld that was relatively homogeneous, where we fertilized at different scales, different patch sizes, and different nutrient concentrations. And we had experimental plots and we measured a lot of different things. But in one of the things that we measured is how the animals responded to these nutrient-rich areas that we created artificially, basically. And elephants were the only ones that were able to, at a large scale, able to pick out which areas had cumulatively the most nutrients. So without just being at a patch and saying, okay, this patch was fertilized or that one had the highest nutrient concentration, at a larger scale, they were able to pick out this area cumulatively had the most nutrients, which was also quite unique. Then elephants are also very intelligent and they're very much self-aware. And there's nice experiments in zoos where they looked at mirrors and things. They present elephants with mirrors, paint one side with paint and other one with water, let it dry. And then when they present the elephant with the mirror, he immediately tries to remove the paint. So there's things like that done and lots of other tests that they've done to show that elephants are very self-aware. They've got a very structured dominance hierarchy. So it's not just amongst the matriarchs, the females, but in the bulls, it's also, and this plays a very important role in bull society. You have to have a complete social structure with older bulls, younger bulls. And we will give an example of how important this is at the end of the talk. So what we can see is that for each of these different functions or abilities that the elephants have, they need more than one of these design elements in order to do this. So they don't just need one; they need many of them. And we're going to look at an example a bit now, starting off with the brain. So they've got large and highly convoluted neurocortex, but with lower number of neuron numbers that indicate long-term memory. So, but their cerebellum is the largest of all mammals. So just for interest's sake, we can compare it with humans. And we see that elephants 257 billion neurons, while humans only have 86 billion. But then when you looked at the different parts of the brain, the big thing lies in the cerebellum, where the elephant have got a huge cerebellum with 251 billion neurons in the cerebellum, and whereas humans only have 69. So what does the cerebellum do? It helps with fine motor control, voluntary movements, balance and muscle movement, and especially that of the trunk. So a convoluted hippocampus and a large temporal lobes provide for above average spatial memory, so that they also have those features. And then they also have subnuclei, which is clustered groups of neurons that share the same function in the elephant's amygdala, and they are unusual in compared to other mammals. And these subnuclei specifically part of processing the emotional aspects of sensory information. And and in other words, social relationships. Okay, so they've got special adaptations for that as well. So when we look at the trunk, um, you'll see that the trunk is basically a pure muscle and nerve. There's no bones in it. The elephant's trunk can lift up to 350 kilograms, 770 pounds, but it also has the precision to crack open a peanut shell without breaking the seed. It contains up to 150,000 separate muscle fascicles, and like I said, no bone and no fat. The whiskers grow all along the trunk and are particularly packed at the tips, where they contribute to the tactile sensitivity of the trunk. There was a nice study done a few years ago by where they dissected a dead elephant and they looked at the trigeminal ganglion, which is an amazing a bundle basically of nerves. It's made up of 400,000 nerves, and it feeds from the brain. It feeds the trunk boss. Basically, it goes into the trunk for that fine motor control that we saw. Um, and in the paper, they also say it's much thicker than the optic nerve, and it suggests that a huge amount of information are carried back and forth between the trunk and the brain. When we look at the feet, we see that elephants are able to pick up vibrations, what they call seismic vibrations, which are low frequency mechanical waves of acoustic energy that travels through the earth. So they pick it up through their feet. And the lady that did the first studies on this was called Caitlin O'Connell Rodwell, and she did studies in, I think it was Namibia and Botswana. She did playback experiments with large speakers and playing back seismic vibrations, and she looked at the response of wild elephants in the open. And she was the first one that really described this. She also wrote a book and a couple of articles. And then later, some of similar studies were repeated. And there they showed also that it's not just that the elephants can pick up these vibrations and also communicate and pick up other elephants, but they can actually distinguish between the seismic vibrations, the source of it, whether it's coming from humans or other elephants or natural causes. So they avoid areas where they pick these vibrations up that are due to human noises. So how do they do this? As there's been a couple of suggestions. One being is that they've got this fatty cushion that they rest their feet on actually, and that fat is very similar to the acoustic fat found in marine mammals, and the function of that is to amplify the intensity of the vibrations, the sound that they pick up, so they're more sensitive to it. It amplifies, the fat amplifies it so that they can pick up these vibrations easier. There was a study done, and just, when Caitlin also brought out her stuff and saw that they communicated with seismic vibrations, people wanted to know a bit more about how this mechanism works. And another study that looked at the dissected an elephant feet, they looked at the presence of the Pacinian corpuscles, which is mechanoreceptors that respond to vibratory stimuli. And we also have that in our hands. And so they found those in quite high densities at the bottom of the feet, and which can be a mechanism. And these mechanoreceptors have also been found to be associated with the larger temporal lobes that we saw that the elephant have. So this definitely looks like a mechanism. So from an evolutionary point of view, how did this evolve, these elements? Because remember, we said now that all of them have to be there together. And this is just to show you kind of where secular science are at regarding the evolution tree of elephants. And so they've got these ones on the gray is the paleo-proboscideans. Those are the early ancestors of elephants that we are looking at now. And then the green ones here is the modern elephants. So with the studies that I'm going to continue to do is we're going to define where exactly are the boundaries of the elephant holobaramin, if it includes all of these groups or or just some of them. So the two ones presented here, the one is from the morphological data and the left-hand side. The right-hand side is from the genetic data and an analysis that they have done. And yeah, so we'll see where we get with that. But what they are basically saying is that, remember, we see the geological column and the fossil record as one event. That's the year of the flood. Whereas they see it as millions of years. So they believe that the paleo-proboscideans, around 40 to 60 million years, this Numidotherium, Barotherium, Phosphotherium, that these animals then evolved and the trunks and the tusks and everything and the size to become the more modern elephants. And how do they do this? When you study this, remember we referred now to the brain of the elephant, the feet of the elephant, and the trunk of the elephant, but that's all soft tissue, and that doesn't stay preserved most of the time in the fossil record. So when we look especially at these very early animals, like the paleo-proboscideans, what do we look at? And there's some interesting studies that's been done that especially by the Witwatersrand University. There's a study that by Nsomalo is a master's student in 22 that looked at things like the infraorbital foramen. So that's this little canal that goes through. Remember that big nerve that we talked about that comes from the brain to the trunk? It goes through here. So he found a very strong relationship between the surface area of this canal and the length or the presence of a trunk, or snout, the length of the snout. And so he looked at extant existing animals and he made this correlation. And so so we can use this then to see whether, judging by the size of this, whether the animal had a trunk and how long it was. Okay. Then Benoit, he also published a study in 2015 where he looked at the size of the brain and in relation to the cranial capacity of the skull. And there's also a very strong relationship with the proboscideans as well. And so you could, so this is also a very strong correlation that you can use. Okay, if the animal had this size of skull, then it most likely had this size of brain. When it comes to the feet, we know that elephants, interestingly enough, has a sort of sixth digit or toe that they can use, that is embedded into this fatty pad, and it's a sesamoid bone, tendon anchoring that functions like a digit, and it goes into this fatty pad, and it helps the animal to walk tiptoed. So they actually walk on tiptoe. It doesn't look like it when you just see the foot, but when you look inside, it's actually walking on tiptoes, and it's resting on this fatty pad. And helps with balance and carrying the weight and all of that. But interesting, the sauropod dinosaurs had expansive foot pads, but they didn't have these pre-digits, according to this paper that we see in Science. So we can hypothesize now, because, I just want to add here that as we've shown before, the pad was strongly related and the surface area of the foot with picking as a mechanism for picking up the vibrations. So the fact that these digits are are anchored in this pad shows that this all had to be present. It's all part of one design. So we can hypothesize now and say if paleo-proboscideans are the ancestors of modern elephant, brain size, and especially the cerebellum and the temporal lobes of the elephant brain would have gradually increased before or at the same time with elongation of the trunk and development of sensory systems required for detecting seismic frequency. So you had to have the feet intact like they were, and we showed now the connection between the feet and those mechanoreceptors and the temporal lobes, the enlarged temporal lobes, and we showed the connection between the trunk and the brain. So if it evolved, it had to, these futures, these design elements would have had to evolve together. You have to have all of it. You can't just have one evolving without the other. So what it would look like, just a graphic demonstration of the hypothesis, is, it would be correct to say that, as over time, as the trunk length increased, the brain size and the trunk length increases both together, or maybe the brain, develops first and then the trunk kind of follows along. But we do not expect no change in the brain size or in the trunks in the brain size, and a decrease in either of them. Or we do not expect the brain to the trunk to develop without the brain. So we can then look at test this. And for the feet, what we would expect is that from an evolutionary point of view, in green, that this sesamoid bone would gradually grow and develop, and from a creationist point of view, we'd expect that these are two different types. So these animals, you would either have it or you won't have it. Okay. So what does the research say? When we look at the secular science that's published in quite famous high-ranking journals, scientific peer-reviewed journals, like Nature, we see that they show that it looks like brain size increased, and they refer to what they call the EQ, which is the encephalization quotient, which is basically just brain size in relation to body size. And then because of the way they group it, it looks, when you look at the EQs, wow, like there's a gradual increase in the EQs. So what I did is I went and looked at this data. First of all, it was shocking to see that somebody can publish in Nature with so little data and such small sample sizes. And then all I did is I took that for the brain, and then from the Nsomalu study, I looked at the trunk data. And all I did is I added, based on where in the fossil record they found them and how old it should be then on average, I added the time in it and just did a very simple analysis to see a regression analysis. And I looked at which models fitted best. The linear model with the brain size at a very low R square. So there was actually no significant change in brain size from those early paleo-proboscideans to the modern elephants. And with regards to the trunk, the best fit was a power function, which was quite a strong fit. And at first I thought, okay, what is this now showing? That there was this sudden increase in the trunk length as we got closer to the modern elephants. And then I thought, remember, this is all, we in the creation science, we see all this as one event as part of the flood. All these animals existed at the same time. But maybe this has got something to do with buoyancy, and that these animals actually floated on top. Just a sort of crazy thought. Then I also just looked at basic t-tests just to look at the difference between groups. And here you can see that there's between the paleo-proboscideans and the transition proboscideans. I grouped it together because there was so little data. I couldn't just use the time, the different layers in the fossil record. So I just grouped the ones, some of them together. And here you see that again, the modern elephants are quite different from those first groups. And with brain size, there was no difference between the two. As far as the foot is concerned, it's interesting that they say that the Nimiru theorem and the Burr theorem, so the paleo-proboscideans, lack sufficiently well-preserved metapodials, and thus the evidence of pre-digit articulations. So they say it's not preserved, they can't find it, it's not there. Um, but there is sufficient evidence to show that these animals, these paleo-proboscideans, were flat-footed. So they did not walk on their toes. They had a plantigrade posture and they had no fatty cushion, in other words. And so, yeah, they did not have the mechanisms of seismic communication or anything like that because they didn't have this fatty pad, or at least not in the way that the elephants have it. And then it also goes on to say that the Dinotheris and the Elephantiformes did have pre-digits. So that's all the modern elephants. And so it shows then, it supports our hypothesis from a creationist point of view that the paleo animals did not, the early ancestors, and even the transition ones did not have any digits, and then all of a sudden fully developed digits appear in the modern elephants. So there's also no evidence of a gradual increase in these feet. So the conclusion, just from looking at it from this way, I don't see any convincing arguments that the elephant evolved the trunk, together with the brain, that happened at the same time, because it had to have happened. It can't have a small brain and a large trunk. It had to have gone together, and it didn't. And the same with the feet and the brain. So basically, you ain't my grandmother. This is a different animal kind that the Lord created from this. So this is the first step. Now the next thing is to look at, remember, we're now cutting off that first part, the paleo-proboscideans. Now looking at closer how, all the others, because there are shovel tuskers and lots of other elephant-like animals, and to see which ones would fit into the elephant kind. Just to support this whole idea and and our findings, we can look at a very recent paper that compared 19 body part ratios of different herbivorous animals and some of their paleo ancestors. And the interesting thing is that when they did this a PC analysis, to show, with all the different futures, you see that the elephants group out together, but they are more similar, like the mammoths are similar to the elephants, which, we will most likely find as well with our later studies. But these paleo proboscideans, like the Moeritherium, is less similar than an elephant than a rhino. Rhino is more similar to an elephant than a Moeritherium is. And they've also had nice diagrams in this paper, and there that you can see that here's the Moeritherium, and so these are all in relation to body size. So these animals had very short, stocky legs compared to an elephant that had much longer legs. And interesting, I love the wording that they use in their conclusion. They refer to body plans, which I thought was like really a creationist term, because that implies that somebody made a plan. Somebody drew up a body plan, which is God. So anyways, the body plans of plesiometric paleogene proboscideans and perissodactyls differed markedly from their descendants in every body part. The most notable difference in the body plan between Paleogene proboscidean Moeritherium and extant Elephantidae is the twofold increase in relative limb height. Okay, so these are very different animals. And then now I just want to quickly give you an example of this whole argument about irreducible complexity, that the elephant was put together with many different unique features to enable it to do these larger level functions. So we're just going back to this diagram. We're going to now look at, if you then tamper with one of these design elements, what happens to the animal's ability to function, to complete certain functions or to have certain abilities. Okay, so in the 1980s, 1990s, actually, we all of a sudden in South Africa and a couple of reserves started experiencing this phenomena where young elephant bulls were killing rhinos. And they called in a lot of elephant experts to try and figure out what is going on here. And they realized that these elephants uh, on these reserves were young bulls, and that the elephant populations on these reserves were all introduced from culling operations in the Kruger National Park. So in the old days, between this, I think it was 60s and 90s, they culled elephants in the Kruger National Park. They culled the adults, and then they captured the young ones between 2 and 7 years old, and they put them together in groups randomly, and then they dropped them off on a lot of new game reserves that were developing during that period all over South Africa. Um, and these young animals, as they grew up, it was when they started, the young bulls started reaching puberty, that this started occurring. And so the elephant experts all realized, okay, uh, we need to bring, looking at East African studies and everything, they needed to bring in old, mature elephant bulls to suppress these young bulls. And they did release, and I think it was Shishloo and Filosi and in Pilanesberg. And then the elephant killing, the rhino killing stopped in many of these cases because the old bulls now suppressed. And basically, because of the domination, the testosterone levels of these young bulls that were out of control started normalizing and going down. And yeah, then everything was back to place. Um, but there's also, so that was a, like with the physical dominance of or presence of another bull. But you can also alter the testosterone with chemical means. So with elephants in captivity, the people that started keeping elephants in captivity for elephant back safaris and things like that, they realized that these young bulls, when they reach this puberty age, they become very aggressive because testosterone is related to aggression. So they found this vaccine, and it's actually used in, I think, the pork industry with boars to alter the smell and stuff of the animals and the meat. But so they started using this, what they call this GnRH vaccine. And what it basically does, it suppresses the release of testosterone. So they treated the animals in captivity with GnRH, and what happens is that as the bulls do not come into mass, they don't become as aggressive. But there's evidence of people that treated some of these animals and compared to ones that were not treated, that penis size is almost half because they start treating them already at 6 to 7 years old, to prevent any form of aggression because they're interacting with humans all the time. And their mass disappears. And in the long term, there's studies that also show that they're basically immunocastrated. So when you start treating them that young and you keep on doing it for many years. But then the game reserve, the wildlife management fraternity or community also got hold of this. And on some of the reserves are very much geared towards tourism. And when these elephants get into must, even if they are, not necessarily at puberty, but maybe a bit older, when they get into must, they become very aggressive as well. And a lot of these reserves, they're worried about interaction with tourists and game drives. And so they started using this as a management tool to suppress the release of testosterone and prevent these bulls from coming into must. So what happens? This is an elephant bull that I had studied for about 18 years, and I was devastated the day I came across this. The area around him was about a 50-meter radius was completely flattened, and it was obvious that it was a fight with another elephant. And there was even a tusk mark in his skull, and that was probably what led to his death. And on closer investigation, I know this population quite well, and this was the oldest bull on the reserve. He was there, he was in his late 20s. when this happened. And so he was a mature bull. The second bull, the only other bull on that reserve, was a 15-year-old bull. And he had started showing signs of going into must. And we did a little test. Because this bull was collared. We took that collar and we actually put it down on the road when we saw the young bull come walking down the road. And when he found this collar, he was like shaking it. He was so aggressive. He was secreting from his glands. And we just realized that it must have been him that killed this bull. It was the only other one. The others are all females and they are smaller, that were able to kill this bull. So how on earth did this happen? This bull was treated with GnRH. So the unintended consequences is that you think you are just controlling a problem now. You're taking out this testosterone, which you're basically removing the ability for the animal to go into must, which is part of the elephant reproductive cycle. Every male goes into this period where he is dominant over all the other males. The females prefer to mate with him. He's constantly secreting fluid from his temporal glands when he's in this phase, and he's also dribbling urine. And he's very aggressive. He's dominant. And it happens to all elephant males, and it's part of being in the hierarchy of elephants. If we then go and with one of the dominant bulls, you put him under GnRH, so you remove that ability for the animal to come into must, because must is strongly associated with increased testosterone. Now this animal doesn't come into, he becomes like a little lamb. He doesn't have that fighting urge in him, that aggression or anything to fight with another male. And a young bull comes and is able to dominate him. And this was not the only example. I know of 3 other reserves where something similar happened. So it just goes to show, you want to treat something now, yeah, but this is so complex. There's many other factors fitting together that you have to think of. And when you take one out, the whole thing crashes down. And so for me, studying irreducible complexity is not just about showing how animals were uniquely created and designed, but it also helps us to be better stewards over creation. So I just want to thank everyone who's watching this. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I want to thank Thomas Purifoy and his team from the Nehemia Foundation that assisted me with going across to present this work. And may all that has breath praise the Lord, and it includes the elephant. Yeah, then here's my contact information. You can go also visit the website, find out more information there about what we're doing, what we're planning. And then if you want to support or donate, please feel free to do so at our online shop. We've got some herbal products and I'm selling my book on there. And then also you'll find some other information there, and you can donate there as well. And or at Give, Send, Go. So your support matters a lot. This work, the research itself, and trying to get established as a creation researcher has all been voluntary with support from my family. But financially, it is really hard because there's no higher education institute that will employ a creationist. It's not the view accepted in South Africa by higher education at the moment. It's all evolution based. So yeah, your support is really appreciated. And then I also recently, we started with safaris to the Kruger National Park. I live close to the park, and it focuses on elephant. And I did my first one about 2 weeks ago. Very successful. The Lord opened the ark and we saw much more than I ever anticipated to see. And yeah, some very special sightings, lots and lots of elephant. And yeah, if you're interested, please come and connect, book a safari with us. I'm also going to start doing creation safaris that look more at the design of elephant and the different animals. And so, yeah, but that is in future. And I thank you very much for listening. Bye.